Welcome to the CRIPS DHA breakout room. Today's topic is about, with a pause in the planning reform, what will that mean for the planning bill and the Kent property sector? I mean, the broader theme will obviously also include, with the new Secretary of State for levelling up, whatever that means, housing communities, pause in the planning bill. Is everything going to move to the north? What does it mean for Kent? Should those in the development industry be concerned? I just want to introduce the panel this morning. First of all, Jason Tao from CRIPS, planning lawyer.
Morning. Morning.
Jonathan Barkwell, planner from DHA. Welcome.
Good morning.
I'm Richard Blackman from CRIPS, a development lawyer. I'll be chairing this discussion this morning. Hopefully you'll have lots of nice, interesting questions for later on. The idea being that we'll have a sort of discussion for 20 to 25 minutes and then take questions at that point. But if you've got questions you want to raise, please feel free to sort of put them on the chat, when you think about it, rather than necessarily waiting for the end. So we've got an idea on numbers of questions that we can change the format accordingly. It would be nice if you have got a question to ask, if you can actually sort of unmute yourself, show your face and so forth at the appropriate time. But if you really, really don't want to do that, and you just want it to be read out, please put that on the chat and we can accommodate that accordingly. So I think with that in order, the first question to Jonathan, with the pausing of the planning bill and changes to the NPPF, will this cause any immediate problems to development in Kent?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. Obviously, so what's just happened over the last couple of years? The government announced the planning bill. Was it last summer? It feels quite a long time ago. Summer last year. Feels a very long time ago now, and that was heralded as being a revolutionary change to the planning system coming up, changing effectively to a zonal planning system, and a number of big ticket items in there that we were all told was going to be the future. That has very much been paused recently. There had been increasing disquiet, particularly from Conservative home counties MPs who were feeling extremely threatened with planning issues becoming increasingly politicised in South East England in particular, and we've seen the by-election results and local election results where planning issues have been very influential in Conservative in particular, tending to lose places on councils and in places losing MPs as well. So will we see any immediate effect? Not really, I think is the immediate answer. The main issue that I think we are seeing right in front of us now is what's happening to a number of local plans where councils are using the pausing as a reason to hold fire on their local plans. Not everyone. There are councils, particularly Tunbridge Wells, Medway, very much pushing ahead with their local plans at the moment. But there are a number of others in the southeast where people are taking this opportunity to pause and reevaluate, particularly if they're going to have to release a lot of green belt land controversially, then they may feel that actually perhaps now is not the best time to be doing that, and let's just see what comes down the road. But so I think that is the main sort of immediate change that we're likely to see. But otherwise, the planning system still exists in the way that it always has, and in terms of development management, it's not having any immediate effects.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key, isn't it? About the questions of it, will the planning bill pausing cause problems? I don't think it will in itself. And in fact, I've always been a big believer that if you let the planning system bed down, then that resolves a lot of the problems. And we've had constant change and evolution of the planning system for many years. I think last year we were talking about the white paper, and I think I I may have been regarded as a bit sceptical, because I thought, well, I
Really,
can't see
Jason?
all. Sorry?
Really? You sceptical?
That me sceptical? Gosh. But because I didn't believe that politically it would all go through, and I don't think that makes me Nostradamus. I think that's just, you could see that, because it was, as Boris said in the introduction to the white paper, this is a wholesale change to the planning system. And if it had all gone through, which I just don't believe it will now, it would have been a real substantial change, which would have presented fresh challenges to the development industry, and the development industry overcomes those challenges, but perhaps at the moment doesn't need a total change to the planning system. And equally, at local authority level, challenges there at a time when resources are short. So I think if there is a sort of a pick and mix out of the planning white paper, and I think that's what we will see, I think that may be better. So, I mean, some of the themes from the planning white paper, such as the call for beauty and design being more at the forefront of planning, that we're already seeing that coming through the system, and I think that will continue. But also interestingly, the planning minister a couple of days ago was at a conference and was talking about the infrastructure tax. This was one of the announcements that was made in the planning white paper about the replacement of Section 106 agreements and SIL by a new nationally set infrastructure tax, which I think when we talked last year, we were along the lines of that was another, sounds like a development tax. And we've had 2 or 3 attempts at those over the years, and they've all slightly failed, such as planning gain supplement, and never actually come to fruition. But he said, watch this. That's right, he wasn't at a conference. I think it was a select committee before the Lords. And he was saying, watch this space in terms of infrastructure tax. So it doesn't look as if that has been totally dropped yet. And again, we have to watch this space, as the minister said.
I think actually, I seem to recall last year, that's what you said. You said, I think you thought the infrastructure tax would survive, even if other parts of it didn't, because of obviously the need to raise cash for infrastructure. Just sort of conscious of time, what is the focus, as appears to be the case for levelling up, leads to a real push for development in the north? Do you think this will be at the expense of the southeast or in addition, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think we're obviously hearing a lot about this. The fact remains that London is very much the honeypot, and that has always been the case. It will be interesting to see to what extent that changes post-pandemic. We're certainly hearing about people increasingly having the idea of moving further away and being able to work remotely. Will that happen in huge numbers? I'm skeptical about that. I think, yes, there certainly, there are some jobs where people will be able to continue to do that remotely and therefore live in different places from where they have been before to be able to do their jobs. But personally, I'm very skeptical about the whole idea of everyone moving away from offices anyway. I think that will continue to a large extent, and people will still need to be close to London. A lot of people will still, and that will very much drive, at the end of the day, it's where people want to live. The number of times I've been told at public exhibitions that we don't need any more housing around here. Why don't you just put it all in the north? Well, the reason is because people want to buy the houses around here. The kids who are growing up and wanting to get their first home, they don't want to go and move to Barnsley. They want a house around here because this is where they live, this is where they work, this is where they've grown up, this is where their friends are. So I am skeptical that there will be any. Clearly, the government is, for political reasons, especially trying to push money and development elsewhere, and we need to ensure that the parts of the southeast that are less well off, and there are many of those, continue to get the investment that is required.
I think I agree with Jonathan on that. One area potentially with a move to more hybrid working, even if we may not see a total return to the offices, and you can see the situation of people if they're hybrid working, then they don't perhaps their housing doesn't have to be as close to London, and so that could release pressure on those districts and boroughs and areas around London in the commuter belt, if I can call it that, to use an old phrase. The commuter belt might become a lot wider, and that may enable housing to be spread, and that may politically take some of the pressure off of as the Tories see it, their heartland, which again, I think they're trying to do this balance, aren't they, of retain the red wall seats in the north, whilst by promising them massive infrastructure, but not alienating the south. And we must remember that there are areas of the south and the southeast, and indeed Kent, that do need more investment and do need economic help. I think sometimes the north-south thing is seen as a sort of north is some part of the world which is economically poor, which is totally wrong. There are real big, huge parts of the Manchesters and the Leedses and around there. There is substantial economic activity. So it's politically it's a bit naive. I know why they're doing it, but there's a need for substantial infrastructure development in the southeast and in the north, and I don't see why we can't have both, frankly. Yeah.
So with that in mind, what are the current challenges for development in Kent, and would a new planning bill resolve them?
I mean, the obvious one at the moment, which I dare say, I can see the names on this, who's in the room, and I dare say most of them are those guys and girls I know, and I would say the top of their list of their concerns possibly might well be to do with operating in Kent, Stod Marsh, phosphates, nitrates, and nutrient neutrality, if I can put it that way, which is causing substantial delays to in particular housing development. And as I know, this is the Kent property market report this morning, but we were celebrating the launch of. But of course, Sussex now is on the horizon, and a lot of the people on this call also operate in Sussex, with the recent announcements that for example, Horsham, given the rivers that flow through there, that district is an area where they are going to be affected by the need for phosphate and nitrate neutrality. A bit like with the Thames Basin Heaths SPA, when that arose, it takes a while to come up with a mitigation strategy, and it's very difficult. I mean, I've done it, I'm sure Jonathan's clients have done it on a site-by-site basis, but that is very difficult, and you tend to need very large sites to do that. And so there does need to be a district or region-wide solution to that. And efforts are being made on that, and progress is being made, but it is taking time. So that would be one area. Jonathan, do you want any?
Yeah, no, I absolutely echo what you've just said on that, Jason. And there is a real need for the government to really grasp the nettle on this one, because it's a serious issue. It's affecting a massive area of East Kent at the moment. And as Jason's just said, a lot of the solutions that can be put in place, and the sort of things that DHA have been helping to facilitate on some sites at the moment, only work on the biggest sites. We are talking about converting arable land to woodland as a solution. I mean, that's not something you can just do lightly on every scheme. Introducing wetlands, introducing new package treatment plants, these are big, expensive solutions that are not easy to put in place. And what the government really needs to do is grasp the nettle and sort out the problem at source, which is really the water companies and the water treatment works. And this is another example of where the planning system is being used because it's convenient to be seen to be doing something to solve an existing problem that actually doesn't have an awful lot to do with planning and housing in the first place in a lot of cases. And the concern is that this is spreading. There are particular issues with phosphates and nitrates in stub marsh, but the concern is very much that Medway is going to be the next area that's going to be affected by something similar to this. We've already seen in the last couple of months, essentially there is a ban on housing and most other forms of development at the moment in Horsham, in Crawley and large parts of Chichester because of an issue down there. We've seen this in the past in the Solent, and it is something that seems to be spreading, and if it is not sorted out quickly, it is going to have an extremely serious effect on house building in the southeast generally. Well, it already is, but it's going to be worse. So that is something through my role that Developers East Sussex, it's something that we're certainly lobbying central government on very hard, and I know that many other people on the call are too. In terms of other challenges, I think the other big one for me at the moment, and Jason has already touched upon it, is local authority resources. And I think we have a huge problem coming down the track on local authority resources. I think we've all become very used to talking about stretched resources in local authorities for the last 20, 25 years plus. And it's just something that we factor in. We always, whenever we talk to local authorities, it's have they got the resources to get our application through in the time that we need, and we're used to talking about that. But I think there is a really serious issue now where we are not seeing planning graduates going into local authority roles in the way that they did before. We're seeing a lot of senior and experienced local authority officers either moving away to other areas or retiring. And there are some local authorities who are really, really stretched in terms of being down to their last very few planning officers. And you cannot properly run a planning department when you're on an absolute when you've only got 3 or 4 officers dealing with everything. And this is something that really concerns me in terms of how it's going to be solved.
I think, and the planning changes that the calls for beauty, for example, there may be new skill sets there that are required. Development viability would be interesting to see how that, but certainly in policy terms at the moment, development viability is a big issue. And again, is that expertise always within councils? Now, if they can recruit external resource and that is paid for by the development industry, then that tends to be the solution, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just picking up from the chat room, just because it's on this topic that we're talking about. Chris was saying that the key issue is Natural England, the lack of resource and influence they have on the planning process. And I think that's what needs to happen at a national policy level. There needs to be a solution, as Jonathan says, because at the moment, how big a problem is it? And it's that balance. Development is always a balance between the impacts it has versus the benefits of it. It's the planning balance that's the heart of every planning decision. And it does seem to me, picking up on Chris's point, that the balance has been skewed too much. For the
Jonathan,
reasons.
I know this is a topic close to your heart. What are DHA trying to do to sort of help with this issue?
So we are very much trying to facilitate solutions for clients. We're working with a specialist company who can help to devise solutions for clients. But the difficulty is, as I've touched upon already, it isn't always practical to bring those solutions in on every site. So on the larger schemes, then yes, there can often be a way of working through so that you can demonstrate neutrality on these issues. But you know, at the other end of the scale, if you've just got a small brownfield development, you're just not going to be able to easily demonstrate things in the same way. And so this is where there needs to be a central approach to it, where and I know this is very much something that we are discussing with authorities, and different authorities are at different stages in terms of how far forward they are. But in terms of if there has to be some sort of offset payment or something, that there can be a standard schedule drawn up that developers will know what they can do, and they can pay their money and move through. But fundamentally, what really needs to be addressed, as I said, is the issues with the treatment works in the first place, and that's where we're also focusing on lobbying government and talking to Natural England and talking to everyone else who is a key stakeholder on this to help move things forward.
And also when you add the need for biodiversity net gain and the matrices on that are being developed, you suddenly, again, you can see that a whole industry developing around landowners putting forward their land, whether that be for mitigation to do with phosphates and nitrates, or land that can be used in a different kind of biodiversity mitigation, for want of a better word. So you end up with the house building industry not only looking for sites to acquire for their main development, but needing access to mitigation land as well. So that's not just phosphates and nitrates, which seems to be the sort of solution at the moment, but it will be under the banner, if you like, of biodiversity net gain as well.
And biodiversity net gain is a huge issue, and is going to become an increasingly big issue for people going forwards. And again, this is something that's being introduced nationally. It's not just Kent, but with the requirement coming down the track for 10% net gain on all sites, and some councils are already effectively requiring that. Others are not quite there yet, but it will be coming through the Environment Bill nationally everywhere. And it very much depends on the individual circumstances of your site and what the baseline position is, obviously, to then demonstrate a 10% gain. But a 10% gain is really difficult to achieve on some sites. I've got sites, I've got an industrial site, which is around half the site is being left as open space and enhanced as open space. And even then, it's really difficult to get anywhere close to 10% net gain. It's a real challenge on particular sites.
It's just picking up just quickly from the chat. Brian Horton, hi Brian, was saying Homes England are also exploring potential role in providing support resource to local authorities and joined up resource and sharing of specialisms. So that's that's what it needs. It needs a coordinated. It may well on the resource. It maybe a Kent-wide solution is required, a county-wide solution. I mean, the more we come back to this on the planning, I'm a big fan of strategic planning and county planning, and the solution seems at that level to me, but yeah. Maybe I'm an old warhorse, I don't know, but there you go.
Sorry, looking at time, I can see Ian's question really, so possibly if I just read it out, maybe easiest time-wise. For me, I'm concerned that this will have a long-term serious effect. So for me, I'm concerned that will this have a long-term seriously affect the Section 106 affordable land? Is this something we need to be concerned about? Any thoughts, Jonathan?
I totally understand Ian's concern on that, and again, we've got to see how this all pans out. Again, there aren't changes immediately in play. I mean, the thing that is beginning to affect things now is the whole first homes proposal, and it's too early really to see how to what extent that is going to have an effect. I'm still not aware of many first home schemes coming forward at the moment, but certainly that has the potential as time goes on to erode the more traditional Section 106 affordable housing aspects, and certainly there were other aspects in the planning white paper which very much would lead to Ian's concern there.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's two concerns there. One is just generally what, talking about things like biodiversity night gain and other forms of mitigation. So you can see when it comes to development viability, the potential to deliver affordable housing being squeezed. So that's one area of concern. The second area of concern perhaps is if we lose 106 agreements and we went to an infrastructure tax solution in the way that the planning white paper suggests, then what the planning white paper said about that was that there would be a sum of money, and that sum of money would be used to acquire land. The beauty of 106 is it forces the market developer to deliver the land, and that is a lot easier to achieve, and the 106 mechanism operates to deliver that affordable housing and to put it into the RP market. So that seems to work. So I'm not sure why we're playing around. If it isn't broke, don't fix it, or whatever. I think I've got that all the way around. But why alter that system to a system where suddenly, potentially, the way you deliver affordable housing land is having to go out and buy land when you're competing with other parties looking to acquire land? That seems a waste of resource to me. And I think what it will end up with is you'll end up with if you like, benefits in kind, in that part you'll offset the amount of money you pay by delivering the land. Well, isn't that 106 agreements? But so I share Ian Scott's concerns.
Very conscious of time here, and I can see, Brian, you're desperate to ask a question.
Not so much desperate to ask a question, to make a comment on the last part of the conversation. Jonathan, Nick Fenton, Mark Cole and I have been having a kind of regular dialogue with what's now DLUHC, that was MHCLG, including with Chris Pincher. And when we've challenged the Minister on the impact of these policies on the delivery of affordable housing, he's always been very confident in coming back, is that the proposals are that there will be an increase in affordable housing, and also genuine affordable housing in the sense of looking at social housing as well as the other affordable tenures. And he was questioned on this week, Chris Pincher, at the House of Lords, one of the House of Lords committees, on a number of these things. I mean, and that's worth a listen to in terms of, I think, the direction of travel. So I think the narrative and the rhetoric is one of being very supportive and looking to increase the amount of affordable housing. The devil, of course, will be in the detail. And part of that is that on forums like this and through the work that we're doing is feeding back in. So hopefully we can help them to finesse what they're doing so that maybe some of the unintended consequences don't realise themselves. But as it stands at the moment, without a little bit of surgery, I think Ian's concerns are very, very valid.
Any comments, sort of, Jonathan or Joseph, on that?
No, I think Brian was sort of agreeing with Jonathan and I. Yeah, I mean, which is why I sort of said one of my opening comments was, we have a system that is no means perfect, but do we really need to totally disrupt it? And you may end up with consequences that you don't want. It's, the last set of massive planning changes that we had, it took us a long time to work the system and for it to bed down, but it did. And yes, it can be improved, but it just feels that some of the changes, if the government sticks to them, could have the results that are the complete opposite of what they're trying to achieve, and reduce the amount of affordable housing that is delivered. It seems slightly nuts to me.
I think that's absolutely right. And sorry, I was just going to pick up on Chris's comment on the chat as well on biodiversity net gain, where this is another example of potentially unintended consequences with biodiversity net gain is essentially leading to a requirement for more land for development in order to accommodate, what are really quite onerous requirements for the biodiversity areas, which is just going to potentially make development less and less dense, requiring more and more land, and then over time, if we consider towns and villages developing outwards in the way they generally do, well, if they're becoming less and less dense on the margins, then you're in terms of looking to the future on sustainable transport options and things like that, it's just going to make it more and more difficult. So that's a really good example of these potentially unintended consequences.
Absolutely. Well, we're sort of running out of time, so maybe a quick 2 seconds of the last question, Jonathan and Jason, which all ties in neatly with what has been said previously, which is, will the UK government ever really grasp the nettle of the need to build more housing where they're actually needed? 30 seconds, Jason.
Well, no is the answer. Would be a really quick answer. Having worked in the planning industry for over 30 years, they always try and drive more housing, but quite often you have this fundamental, I think it's because of our political system is short term. It operates on a sort of now it's a fixed well, it's not anymore after they changed the rules, but broadly a 5-year cycle. And so there's no long-termism. And the benefits of housing growth, the social, economic, and potentially environmental benefits are not properly considered. And it is seen as there is still a great deal of NIMBYism in the system. And NIMBYism equals votes. And that's the problem with the way our system operates. And that's been at the heart of it ever since I've worked in the profession, and way before me. And I dare say way off, into the future it will be. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree with that. It's that is the fundamental issue here, isn't it? Which is that new housing does not get votes and stopping housing does. And yeah, with the current system, that is exactly the problem. I mean, the last couple of years is a perfect example of that. Only last year in the forward to the white paper, Boris Johnson was talking about the need for these housing, that we're going to bring forward these houses, whatever. People have just got to accept housing as coming forward. And a year later, lots of talk about votes being lost and examples of votes being lost, and suddenly, well, actually, no, maybe not. Then maybe let's just forget about trying to have all the housing in the southeast. Let's find ways of stopping it. And yeah, even things like being blunt, what's happening at Studmarsh and elsewhere. One of the reasons why isn't the government stepping in and making sure that things are happening faster than they are? Because there aren't votes in it. It is politically convenient for people that there is some other environmental problem that prevents the housing coming forward.
Anyone with a desperate desire to raise one final question? I'm conscious I'm going to get in trouble because it's the main session starts in 5 minutes. It's amazing how quickly sort of 35-40 minutes goes, doesn't it, really? Hardly touch the surface of any of these really, really fundamentally important topics. Perhaps we can sort of take this forward at some future opportunity where there's a bit more time to have these things. So thanks for coming this morning. Time for a quick coffee and a quick comfort break before Ron Rosa, I think, at 9:45. So thank you very much. Have a good day.